Welcome, our fellow lovers of love. Welcome to Nate Night Love, where we dive deep into the messy, beautiful chaos of life, love, and everything in between. I'm your host, Jazz. She's Lovey, and tonight we're unpacking it all from shocking historical truths to workplace dramas and relationship red flags. Everyone in your wife's school skipped the fact that George Washington wasn't the first president of the United States, just the first under the Constitution? Or maybe you're crushing on a coworker and wondering how to keep it chill. We'll tackle tough work situations like bosses sidelining safety concerns, new hires out earning you, and that one coworker who runs to HR over everything. Plus, we're diving into trust issues, why your husband's sneaking around in incognito mode. I can say that. And what do you do when your therapist crosses a line? Grab a drink, get cozy, and let's sort through the real stuff on tonight on Late Night Love. All right, Lovey. So what do we got tonight? We're still, just for those of you who know, we're still kind of working through our new studios. It's starting to look nicer, but yeah.
Yeah, it is.
I sat out here
together.
I sat out here for 2 hours trying to play with a camera, get it. So if we're still looking a little goofy. Yeah. Well, because you set the cameras and then you change the lighting and then you got to go reset the cameras and it's a royal pain. But anyway, it is what it is. So what are we starting with tonight?
Well, I think this is one for you.
Yes. Well, yes, is what I put on there just because I was looking for something interesting to start with.
Well, it is interesting. Why isn't it taught that George Washington was not the first president of the United States, but the first one under the Constitution?
Because the previous assemblies were actually called the United States. There were Articles of Confederation. It wasn't called the United States. It wasn't called the United States until the current Constitution we live under called it that. So that's why George Washington is the first president. Those three, depending upon how you calculate it, two or three attempts at a government failed. Those who wrote the original Constitution that we now abide by, they were sent there to try to modify the Articles of Confederation. They decided it was a worthless cause, closed all the doors, locked the windows, closed the doors. Lock the doors, close the windows. Good Lord, I can say this. This is going to be a long night, Lovey. They closed the windows, they locked the doors, and they sat down and reinvented the government. It was a whole completely new thing. They far exceeded their mandate and came out with something that many people across the world, find beautiful. I find it interesting that we have this glorious Constitution, something unique across the history of, across the history of time. And yet when we go try to nation build, we do it under parliamentary systems for some reason. So I don't know. We're weird. But that's why. It's because it is the first president of the United States. He was not the president of the Articles of Confederation, whatever. That was different actual government. In a sense, different countries. Okay. What do we got next?
How do you deal with a crush on a coworker?
Oh, well, you try to stay away from crushes on coworkers if that best possible. It is really the best policy.
I just avoid them.
Yeah, that's the best policy.
Until it dies inside.
Well, yeah, that's a little melodramatic there, but this the basic theory. It's true, is you try not to follow up on it. Now, sometimes love has no boundaries and you can't help yourself and all that kind of thing. But then you tread carefully, I suppose. If you're both in, upper management, it's a bigger issue than if you're, ground level employees. No one really cares what ground level employees do amongst themselves. Upper management becomes power issues and things like that. So one of you likely have to leave. So, it really kind of depends. If you're a barista at Starbucks and you've got a crush on a coworker, go for it. Knock yourself out. There's no reason not to, right? Be polite and be respectful about the whole thing, but there's no reason not to show your interest.
So do baristas that have crushes on each other, do they ask each other out for coffee?
They'd probably ask each other out for a drink after work. Would probably be the go-to thing there, I would suspect. But, flings amongst restaurant workers and things like that, it's relatively common. And, we're all adults. And we learn how to deal with these things. But as a general rule of thumb, you try to avoid it. Okay.
Okay. My boss told me to stay home when I questioned work safety.
Well, it depends what you questioned, I suppose. Some jobs are inherently dangerous.
There was no explanation.
And so, it just is what it is. Let's pick, a firefighter. It's just an inherently dangerous job, right? You can try to be as safe about it as possible, but realistically, there's only so much you can do. And the same thing with things like, fishing or being a lumberjack or any of those really dangerous, genuinely dangerous jobs. Pizza drivers actually is a highly dangerous job. We don't think of it that way, but it actually is. Literally everything that they do is dangerous. Driving, walking up to strangers' houses, carrying around cash. Luckily, they don't have to carry around cash much anymore, so that's a little bit better. But they're one of the most dangerous jobs we don't think of them as dangerous. No. Construction work, but someone's got to stand on top of the pile and attach those things. Some of the things they used to do back in the 20s, makes our skin crawl. So
I know.
And that was just life for them. And so maybe we
have OSHA.
Maybe he's being a little too safe. Maybe the job site is being a little unsafe. If you think it's really unsafe, you have two options. You can leave and go somewhere else, which is always my personal choice. Or you can, go through the legal means of your jurisdiction. Follow your reports to your local OSHA office.
Well, there's a third option.
What? Man up and go to work?
No, he told him to stay home. So he should just stay home and file for unemployment. It's unsafe work environment. They told him to stay home.
Yeah. Well, they might have told him to stay home because he's one of those whiny little people who complains about everything. He's essentially a Karen and you just don't want to deal with him anymore. It's always that possibility.
I was trying to be nice.
Everybody else wants to get their work.
I had thought of that.
Everybody else wants to get their work done. But the problem is, all of those, that whole range of things is entirely possible. We just discussed every little, potential thing. All of them are just equally as likely. There are businesses who have unsafe practices. There are people who are overly cautious and will nag at every little thing. And the great variety in between, right? It all exists. It all exists at a relatively similar numbers, so none of it surprises me. I've seen it all. So, yeah, it just is what it is.
Okay.
And he's got to make a choice how he wants to deal with it. My personal choice is to go find some place that matches your particulars. It's a far better option than fighting the system and you're just going to be unhappy. Why do you want to work to some place that puts what you feel is in danger anyway? So find some place that doesn't. You're in a small town, there's few options. You have a different calculation than someone who lives in a big city and has lots of options, right? So, or you can just man up and go to work like everybody else. Okay, what's next?
New girl I'm training to do the job makes $3 an hour more than me.
Well, why? There's always reasons for these things. Is she more experienced? There's always a reason.
Oh.
Maybe this person's just bad at, renegotiating their salary. Maybe the new girl they're training isn't actually being trained for this particular role. Maybe, as I've seen happen many times, someone who's been hired as a vice president, actually has to go through and work a week in each kind of job location. Mm. And so you may be training someone who's literally, they have a plan for, but she has to understand how everything works. And so you're training, she's not actually replacing you. You're training her because she's some management person or something eventually. That's the job track she's on. Who knows? My guess is they're just not very good at negotiating their salaries. Hasn't been done. Yeah. And new hires get paid more because
I'd ask for more money.
yeah, you could. But I'd make sure that before you ask for more money, make sure that you actually understand what that new person actual job is. You may not know what their actual job is. So. Okay.
Why there's so many shit managers literally everywhere?
Well, because people don't train managers to be managers. They take people who are good at a job and then they give them a promotion and then they never actually train them. You get more training how to make a hamburger than you do how to be the manager of someone to make a hamburger. You do. Sadly, it's how that works in a lot of places. And then you wonder why are all the managers not very good? Because you don't train them. And just because you're good at a group of tasks doesn't mean you're good at managing people who do that group of tasks. Those are different skills.
Absolutely. Yes, I know.
Those are vastly different skill sets. And so you ask why, goes back to the question before. Maybe she's destined to become a manager. That's where her skill set is, but she can't manage people until she knows the job. And so maybe they're actually training their manager properly. And again, so why are there so many crap managers is because there's crap training of managers. It's a really simple calculation.
Is there management training?
Sure there
people
is.
Can go to?
Yes. But you have to essentially, for the most part, you have to do it yourself. You have to take it upon yourself to train yourself to be a good manager. It's taking leadership courses, YouTube University is a good place to start. You don't have to go and spend tens of thousands of dollars at some elite university or even your local community college. All the information is available online. You can get it all. Hopefully you can find someone who's packaged it in a way you can understand. That's the wonderful thing about the internet. Everybody's saying basically the same things, but they're saying it in different ways. Find the one who relates to you. And then you can find your management strategy. Okay.
Would you ever work a 16-hour day without getting paid?
Well, lots of people do that. It's called volunteer work. People do it all the time.
Internships?
If you need to network in order to get ahead in certain industries, internships are a way to do it. It's not blind. It's not without being compensated. So I get to be places where people who make decisions are, therefore they will think of me when they have decisions to be made. If you're there, you're a known quantity. Hey, this person works hard. I'm going to give them a shot. It's how a lot of things historically have started. But volunteer work is also work. Do you learn skills? Experience? Mm-hmm. Lots of people start with volunteer work, become competent, and then you can take that competence and get paid for it. So yes, lots of people work 16-hour days without getting paid. Start with the most obvious is volunteer firefighter in an emergency. They're volunteer firefighters. Mm-hmm. They don't get paid. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean they're not compensated by their communities. Those are usually small, close-knit communities, Mm-hmm. People will drop them off half a cow or something, at some point, just as a thank you, these things will happen. But yeah. Okay.
Need advice. I have a coworker that reports every little thing to HR, and it's creating a toxic environment.
Yeah, that is a toxic environment. Here's what you can do. You can play the game. this person's constantly reporting to HR is creating a toxic work environment. You report them to HR. That's what you do. You make HR make a decision. And if you won't, you find a different job if you can, because it's always going to be a crappy place to work if the HR doesn't actually. Now, let's remember, HR exists to protect the company. That's why they exist. They don't exist to protect the employees. They exist to protect the company. So you use that in your favor. If that person's the one who's actually causing the toxic work environment, if you and your coworkers complain to HR that that person's complaints is causing a toxic work environment, we're all walking around on eggshells all the time, then they become the problem that HR has to deal with, because they are the ones who's the potential danger to the company's bottom line. They're the ones who are going to end up suing, so they're going to figure out how to get rid of them. Just play the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can.
Yeah, that's, well, if you're in a big corporate environment, it's the only
That's about the only thing you can do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
My couples therapist made comments during my individual session that were so concerning, I no longer feel emotionally safe continuing therapy with my girlfriend. How do I tell my girlfriend?
You tell her just that.
Because apparently everything was his fault. He's passive aggressive, all these terrible things. And he just doesn't understand. He feels attacked.
Yes, and if that's the way a therapist is going, he's correct. No one should be feeling attacked in a therapy session. That's defeating the purpose of the therapy session. The point of the therapy session is to get people to express themselves without feeling like they're attacked. So it's just a bad therapist. That's what this is. Or the wrong therapist. Or you made the mistake of going to her therapist and not your, as a couple, therapist. So
It's probably her therapist.
be my guess.
Yes.
Be my guess. It's her therapist. And so her therapist has a, it's understandable. The therapist has a perspective. And she wants to express her perspective, which is fine, but it's probably an incomplete perspective. It's what happens. Your job in your therapy session isn't to give the perspective of your spouse. It's to give the perspective of the group, of
The couple.
the couple.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's different. So that's why, in a sense, you shouldn't have your personal therapist shouldn't be your couple therapist. Your couple therapist should be different. It's a different job. It's
literally a different job.
It's literally a different job. It would take an exceptionally good therapist to pull that off, and that exceptionally good therapist probably wouldn't want to do it because they know better that they're probably not good to play all this multiple roles. So my suggestion, find a different therapist that's yours as a couples therapist. Okay.
Why does my husband use incognito mode in his browser?
Well, okay, the generic reason would be he's looking at, shall we say, adult-oriented content and doesn't want to leave traces. That's probably, you roll the dice, you're probably going to run that one up.
Why else would he?
Well, there's lots of reasons.
Like what?
Well, lots of people just don't like to be tracked by cookies and internet and things like that. They do banking in their incognito mode, so those kind of things don't happen. Lots of people will use sites where you can stream content that you can't get without paying for it other places. Piracy streaming.
Mm-hmm.
People might go to piracy websites, and then incognito mode gives you an extra level of protection is the wrong word, but an extra level of coverage.
Okay.
From those kind of things. There's lots.
So here we come back to adult content.
Well, it isn't necessarily adult content. It's probably sports, but you can't get that sports unless you pay for it. And so you go online, you find the place that's showing that. But because those places, work off ads and things like
So
that.
he could be watching sports.
Well, he's probably doing a quite number of things. Or he could just be someone who's, a lot of people who are programmers will use incognito mode exclusively because they're afraid of people like themselves. I know what people know how to do, and it's just an extra layer of security. It by itself isn't going to keep them secure, but layered upon all the other various activities they do.
Okay.
But banking is another big one. A lot of people do their banking in incognito mode, so nothing gets saved to the browser. It all goes poof when they close the browser.
Okay.
So there's plenty of legitimate reasons to be using incognito mode, and quite frankly, browsing adult content is a legitimate reason, and just one trying to be discreet about it is,
So he's actually trying to have a care for her feelings.
Yeah, or hide his embarrassment. All right, that's it for our life questions tonight. We're going to see you next Monday for those, but join us next Tuesday. I'm forgetting, I keep messing my days up. And we'll see you on Thursday for our love question.